into.
I like it.
All right. So take her away.
Okay. I'm going to go live into our Facebook group. So let me get that connected and then we can start off.
Sounds great, man.
All right. This is preparing here. It's just about ready.
Okay. I'll be back in 2 seconds. I realize I need to set this thing on do not disturb real quick.
Okay.
All right.
Good. It's dragging here a little bit. Let me stop it and then try one more time, and then we'll just go
okay.
a list of what happens. So. You know Lisa Smith Batchins, by the way, while we're sitting here?
Oh, yeah, sure thing. Yeah, I've known her since, probably 97, I think, as we met at a race in Ecuador in 1997 and been acquainted ever since. How do you know her?
She's helped me out with some ultra running training as a coach. So yeah. So I gotten to know her over the last year.
Yeah, she knows her stuff.
Yeah, she's a sweetheart too. Yeah.
Yeah, she is. If you talk to her, tell her I said, hey. Every once in a while we reconnect, but it's been a while.
I think we're about ready here. Thank you for being patient.
Yeah, no worries, dude.
All right, here we go. So welcome back, Championship Leadership Podcast. We got Charlie Engle here from Durham, North Carolina. Charlie, thank you so much for taking some time today.
My pleasure, Nate. Happy to be here, brother. Better than being outside.
That's right. Yeah, sounds like you got some freezing rain over where you're at, and do you still? I guess a quick question on that. So obviously, you've done a lot of physically challenging experiences, events, some incredibly challenging ones, and I know you're continuing to do that. So, so that type of weather, that style weather, do you look forward to that? Because then it gives you an opportunity to get out in some of that weather, or would you prefer to be able to just kind of train in a little bit more ideal conditions from time to time, and not worry about those types of conditions?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I love weather, especially if you're training for an event. It's the weather's going to be whatever the weather is on race day. So when you make a training plan, like today I've got 12 miles I need to run, and I'm damn sure not going to do it inside. So it means that whatever the weather is out there, I always look at it too, like the worse the weather, the less people there are out on the trail.
True, right?
Yeah. So this time of year, it's the cold. And here in North Carolina, sometimes it's the heat, and I prefer heat over cold, but whatever it is, I'm going to go out in it.
Yeah, right. And I kind of figured that would be the answer. Well, before we get too much more into you, because we definitely want to let the listeners know that haven't heard of you before, who you are and what you're up to. I do like to ask this question. Championship Leadership is the name of the podcast. So what comes to mind for you when you hear championship leadership? What's that mean to you?
When I saw the name of your podcast, you know what hit me, and I'm just going to go the first thing that came into my mind is part of my story is that I've been clean and sober for 28 years, and the correlation to the name of your podcast is this idea of what I call attraction rather than promotion. The idea for me is to just live my life. I do live it pretty publicly. I share my struggles, not just the positive and good things that happen, but the hard things, the mistakes that I make. And it's not my job to tell anybody else how to live their life, to give advice on that, but I'm open about sharing my experiences. And if they can take one small nugget from something I've done right, and like I've done a good job of sharing the struggle with other people.
Yeah, yeah. How much of an impact, because you do a lot of different experiences all over the world. And maybe you can, well, maybe get into that real quick first before we get into those questions. But, I came across you first, I think, with your book, The Running Man. And you definitely go into some detail on some of the struggles that you've had and your story throughout your life. And then watched your documentary on Netflix. What's it called?
Running the Sahara.
Running the Sahara, which was incredible, and just some of the other amazing feats that you've done in between there and since then. Maybe share with the listeners here real quick, who you are, what the path that you've been on, and how you've gotten to where you are today, and what you're up to today.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. So for those who didn't hear it, my name is Charlie Engle. I live in North Carolina. I've been, my story really revolves around when I was 20. I'm 58 now. So when I was 29, at that point, I'd spent about a decade destroying myself with drugs and alcohol. And I finally made a decision that, I I had a choice between, I chose running. And, it's this idea that for me, I adopted I think, a philosophy of, what happens to us in life isn't nearly as important as what we choose to do about it. And so everything I ever talk about, my book, Running Man, which Simon and Schuster published a couple of years ago, allowed me a platform and a voice to be able to share not just the hardships, but also the good things. I have run in over 40 countries. I was the first person with two teammates of mine to run all the way across the Sahara Desert years ago. And as you mentioned, there's a film, Running the Sahara, and Matt Damon produced that and narrated it. And together, Matt and I created a nonprofit called H2O Africa. And today it's called water.org, and it's the world's largest clean water nonprofit. So wow. It's a great example of sometimes even stupid, hard ideas that make no sense can lead to something really positive in other areas. And flashing forward to today, I'm married. My wife is currently battling cancer, and it's not the first time in her life. And again, I'm very open about sharing the struggles that come in life. Most everybody I know is struggling in some way these days, and anybody who says they're not, quite honestly, I would probably not believe that there's not some struggle in their life. And I do live by the idea that the more of that struggle that we share with other people, along with the victories and the things that are going right, it's not all about, the bad things, but sharing that struggle. It's the human condition, that's the way that we all get through this together.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. How did you come into running? Where did that come from?
Yeah, I ran in high school and ran pretty well in high school. And I grew up with this legacy in my family of being told I was going to be a runner. My grandfather had been the head track coach at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill for about 40 years. And he died when I was young, so I never knew him, but I grew up with this legacy of running in the family. And, I went to Carolina myself as a 17-year-old freshman, and I actually found out pretty quickly that I was quite average as an athlete, as a student. There were 4,000 other shiny new freshmen at Carolina that all had, great resumes like mine. And, I got lost. And I got lost in drugs and alcohol. And when at 29, my first son was born, and that was really the catalyst to change my life. And I found running again at that point. And in fact, the day I got sober, the very next morning, I put on my running shoes and went for a short, painful run. And for the next 3 years straight, I ran without missing a single day. And I also went to recovery meetings. And in that way, during those 3 years, I slowly began to reclaim my life and build a new one.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Thank you. And I do remember that now, from the book as well. What's also in the book, you talk about you end up going to prison, and I'd love you to share, just what you learned from that. I remember you actually you ended up running 100 miles, right? Was it 100 or was it 100? It was 100, right?
It was 135.
It was 135 for the Badwater. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was 135, and just incredible. We're on this small little track, and how you used to run in place in your cell, and just all of that. Maybe talk about that experience. I can't imagine having gone through that experience, and how you're able to come out of it stronger and use that to push you forward.
Yeah, well, look, Nate, and you'll I'm sure relate to this, as will your listeners, and even people who win championships have struggles. And this run I did across the Sahara really kind of put me on the map, and I was on Leno and all over the world. I've spoken at the United Nations, at NATO in Belgium. I've had some amazing opportunities, but we all are on this roller coaster of low places and high points. And in 2010, I became the target of an investigation by one federal agent that worked for the IRS. And in short, I became the only person in the United States charged with overstating my income on a home loan application from 2005, a no doc stated income loan. And really, it was just that agent's way of targeting me. And all those details aren't important. They're in my book and on my website if anybody wants to know. It's on the front page of the New York Times a couple of times. But suffice it to say, I ended up getting sentenced to 21 months in federal prison in Beckley, West Virginia. And so on Valentine's Day 2011, my kids dropped me off at the front of the prison in Beckley, and I began to serve basically a year and a half in federal prison. And it changed my life in so many good ways, actually. And like most things in life, it took a few days to figure out that my happiness and the way I was going to handle this situation was still entirely up to me. And no matter what the circumstances were, it was still my choice whether it's a positive experience. And while I never would have chosen it, it allowed me, and I mentioned attraction rather than promotion a minute ago, right? And so I went into prison, and the way I handled it was to do what I've always done. I started running. Yeah. And nobody ran in this prison. Maybe 3 guys were running regularly. And by the time I left there a year and a half later, I had a running group of about 50 guys running with me every day. Wow. I had 11 of them that had lost more than 100 pounds. I was doing yoga with 25 guys on the softball field 3 days a week. And, the experience is this idea that I always say, which is, to keep it, you have to give it away. I don't always feel like I have a lot to offer, but what I do have is my energy, my experience. And if I go out and do something, certain people are going to be attracted to that. It's like the rest of life, and those are the right people for me to spend time with. And in prison, these guys all thanked me. And I mean, the day I left prison was a happy day for me, but I had a lot of guys in tears and like hugging me, and I was blown away because they were thanking me.
Yeah.
And in fact, they're the ones who got me through the experience.
Yeah.
Giving away whatever gift it is that I had was the way that I got through that hard time. And strange as
Yeah, that's an incredible story. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Gotcha, brother.
Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's incredible story, really is. And which really kind of goes into, obviously, championship leadership. We talk leadership inside of this podcast, and clearly, you found a way to inspire others and to lead others while you were spending your time there in federal prison. Leadership, I always say, it starts with leading yourself first, and clearly you have that ability to do that just through the dedication, the discipline that you have, and what you do inside of your physical area of your body, right? And working out and training and taking on incredible experiences. How important is that to you? Or, even from the drug addiction to the running, they're two different spectrums but they're both extreme, right? And and obviously you've had that in you to take whatever it is that you're doing to an extreme level inside of your life. But how have you seen the ability to lead yourself and to really take care of yourself through dedication, commitment, discipline, and whatever you do to then go and to inspire those other people that you were talking about?
Yeah, Nate, it's a great question. I first want to comment on what you said in the beginning, and it's so important. It's this idea that, well, look, I treat coaching and life, if you will, just like I'm relating to my kids. And the old lesson that, if you're sitting your ass on the sofa eating chips and telling your kids to go outside and play, that's a really terrible message and a really terrible way to send it, because it's ineffective for them. They're going to emulate you. And it's that way in the rest of life. I have mentors, some of whom they know they're a mentor for me, and some don't know at all. I watch them from afar, but I take pieces of what they do and how they live that I respect and admire, and I try to apply those to my life. And I know that there are people who hopefully see me the same way. Whether they ever tell me they're watching, it is not relevant. I try to conduct myself in an open, honest way that, people can say to me, I like what you're doing, or they can never say anything at all. And I think that that's the foundation of kind of living honestly. And inspiration, I mean, I'm sorry, man, inspiration comes from doing, from taking action. Words can be inspirational, totally hear that, but I see too many people on social media and other places who they've got their thing that they're trying to sell and whatever, but they're not out there actually trying to do anything. Like they've changed their life to something that their full mission in life is to promote themselves and their goals and and the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to do your thing. I want to keep running and racing and sharing my sobriety and the environmental issues. I'm a plant-based eater. It's not my job to try to convince other people to eat plant-based. That's not what I'm trying to do. But I share my experience with it in order to, as I always make the joke, there's a lot of vegan curious people out there. And if I'm not trying to force it on them, but I'm sharing how I do it, then maybe some of them will say, hey, you know what, I'm going to give that a try. And that's the best way to do it. And I try to approach every single big topic in my life that same way, to lead by example rather than with my words.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I obviously was picking up on that from, just the shared of the impact that you had on others just in prison by doing what you just would do and leading by that example and how that attract others. And you mentioned it before too of, I'm not necessarily trying to get a bunch of people to follow you. You're just going to go out and do what you do and do it at a high level and be that example, not just for your family and your kids, but for anyone else that might be watching, because you know that there's a lot of people that just watch and don't necessarily let you know. Just like you said, you have mentors that don't really know that they're a mentor for you because you watch them from afar. And there's a responsibility there if you can recognize that man, there's people watching me, and am what I'm doing and what I'm saying and what I'm putting out there, is it a good example or is it not, right?
Yeah, well, again, it's about being honest, and I try to share the struggles as much as anything, because it's a crazy thing. I encourage other people to try this experiment. If the only thing you ever post on social media is high volume, life is amazing, everything's great, more power to you. I'm not being critical of that, but try one day sharing a bad day. Don't just take a day off from social media. Share that bad day with people and tell people why you're feeling that way. And I guarantee you get 2 or 3 or 4 times the engagement that you got from the King of Happy Land post,
Yeah,
because the only thing that we all do, all of us, no matter how you live your life, is struggle.
yeah,
And life, it's not about life being a struggle. There's moments of joy that you also have to really take hold of and recognize. I'll give you an example. For me, I still enter 100 milers, and I do long races and big events, and people ask, why are you still doing this? And I like to tell them that the only moment I care about in 100 miler is the moment that I want to quit, because that's the only moment that I'll actually remember. And it's the same with business. It's the same with relationships. We don't remember the easy times, the times when everything went right, because those aren't the times that actually help shape our, who we are and how we respond to stress and difficulty. It's the times when you're sure that you can't go on anymore, and then you find a way to go
yeah,
another mile, another mile. Those are the ones that we remember.
yeah. Well, I was gonna that's a good segue, because I was definitely gonna ask you about that. From running across the Sahara to multiple times through races like Badwater and many of the other things that you've done and accomplished. Yeah, what would be the driver for you to continue to do that, which I think you just spoke to? And then, I think a lot of others would look at someone like you. I've had the opportunity to have Dean Carnesi on and some others that just take on crazy physical challenges. Iron Cowboy's been on, and yeah, what continues to keep you driven to take on these types of experiences? And I think the other thought would be that someone like yourself doesn't ever have the thought to quit, but obviously you do, right? You're not any different than anyone else, but it's what you're doing inside of those moments that I suppose makes a difference, right?
Yeah, well, first I'll speak to this idea of, again, not wanting to quit. I don't know a single ultra runner, if they're honest, or business person, or anybody who's trying
Yeah,
to raise kids. Come on, man. We all every once in a while are going, Jesus, I'd love to just quit this and go do something else.
right.
Because that's, some days it's hard, but it's important to recognize those days. And to make the metaphor about running, if I'm at 60 miles of 100 miler and I am depleted, I feel like I want to quit, and I'm asking myself that dreaded question, why did I think this was a good idea again?
Yeah,
What experience tells me that it's all about fuel. All right. So I know in that moment, I've trained for the event, I was
yeah,
ready. So if I don't feel good right now, it means that I need to eat 1,000 calories. I need to drink a couple of big drinks. I need to just keep moving, but slow down and don't sit in a chair and wait to feel better. Just keep it moving, consume the calories, give my body the fuel. And again, the same applies to business, to family, to life. You know the fuel that you need in that moment, and it's not instantaneous, but 20 minutes later, by the time I hit 61 or 62 miles and I've eaten all that and I've drunk and I've slowed down a little bit, suddenly the body knows what to do. The body will, even if I still feel like crap, I feel better.
Yeah.
And when your pain level or your insanity is at a 9, if it just drops down to a 7, it changes your whole outlook and you begin to feel optimistic again. And I think again that's my mission, to project to other people. And I occasionally do a little coaching with people and all of that. And what I try to do, I'm not a good nuts and bolts, like I'm not the guy to tell you how many miles to run on Tuesday. That's not my thing.
Yeah.
But I am the guy to tell you what the benefit is and how, if you're a runner or you do any athletics, I would bet almost anybody listening to this that regularly exercises, that the best ideas they ever have come either during exercise or immediately after exercise.
Yeah, that's a great point.
And it's because the and the way and the way that feels, even if it feels awful while you're doing it, it fires your brain. Man, you're thinking. I do most of my phone calls when I'm out running, if they're creative calls, because I actually know that it's going to help me think more clearly, that my ideas are going to be firing much more quickly. My biggest problem is taking notes, because I get home and I forget what I said. But it's this idea that, and it's all about energy and motivation, and just if you move, things will always go better. And so my mission is to not look back. My wife gives me a hard time because I rarely talk about things I've already done, because I'm so super focused on what I'm doing right now and what I hope to do in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's so true for me too. I have a ton of, and I will actually stop, or I'll start walking or slow down or whatever, and I'll get my notes out and I'll take notes, because I will not remember them if I don't put it down. But and then sometimes I put it down and I'm like, what was that thought again? Like, what am I trying to say here? Because I'll just
that happens to me all the time. I get back and my brilliant ideas that I had, I'll come back and I'll tell my wife, and she's looking at me like, really? That's your big idea? And I'm like, okay, maybe that was not great, but but that's still the best way to do it.
That's good. One more main question here. I want to respect your time. What's like a critical moment, kind of a fork in the roads moment for you, where obviously you made the decision that you did because it has you where you are today, but had you not, you'd be in a very much different place in life than you are today. I think there's a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs on this podcast that listen, that are especially after 2020 and kind of still continuing into 2021 with the challenges that we've had. There's a lot of critical moments people are facing and not always sure how to decide or choose and move inside those moments. So it's powerful to hear others and how they've reacted in those situations. So is there a moment that comes to mind you can share?
Well, I mean, if I go back to, the day I got sober, which is an easy one, and then I'll move to the future.
Yeah.
Had I not made that decision that day, I doubt I would be alive at this point, but it sounds strange to say, but I'm actually grateful for drugs. And what I mean by that is, if I had just been a drinker, I was a bad drinker too, but there's a decent likelihood that today, 28 years later, I would still be drinking.
Yeah.
And my life would be miserable, and it would just be, it would not be a good situation. So that was a fork that, I definitely chose the right path. And the people that are listening to this, anybody who's ever been successful at business, and I don't necessarily mean monetary success, whatever your definition of that, there's a period of obsession that you need in order to be successful. You have to commit yourself to that goal, to that thing, not knowing where it's going to go or if it's going to work out. You have to be obsessed. So there are the hardest decision that I make today is spreading myself too thin. I have a couple of business things going on right now that I know in my gut I am not giving them the attention that they need. And if I don't switch that gear and become obsessed, even addicted to the goal that I have around that business idea, then it's going to wither on the vine, and it's just going to die and go away, or I'm going to half-ass it. I'm great at the idea portion,
Yeah.
and I freely admit that I am often terrible at the execution part. And so the final thing I'd say about that is, one of the decisions I'm working hard on these days is to not be so covetous of my ideas and worried that like somebody's going to steal them. First of all, if your idea is that brilliant, 100 other people have already
Yeah,
had the
right.
idea before
Yeah.
you. So,
Yeah.
it's the execution that matters. It's actually getting it done. So I'm trying to be more open about letting other people help me make the right decision, rather than owning all of the idea and the decision making myself. And that's a fork in the road that I face every single day, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to do a better job at.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's yeah, there are a lot of dreamers and idea people out there too, that same situation, just lack the execution. So that's a great one. Appreciate that. What's
I have to tell you one quick story, just
yeah.
quick. So years ago, I was working as a TV producer for ABC's Extreme Makeover Home Edition. So I was the senior producer on this show, and this is at a time in the mid 2000s. I like, so I came up with a couple of ideas for shows, and one of them was just simply called Repo Man. All right, so this is reality TV's heyday back in like
Yeah.
2005.
Yeah.
And the creator of Extreme Makeover Home Edition is like my best friend at the time. And so he's got this power right now to get shows made. So I wrote this super simple idea that it would be interesting to follow around, guys who are repossessing cars and the craziness that might happen around all that, and and whatever. I half-assed it and pushed this and that and whatever, and was basically had a few doors closed, and I gave up on the idea. 2 years later, there's like 4 shows on
Yeah.
TV about houses, boats, cars, whatever. I mean, this idea, and it really drove home the point. I have no idea if I had the idea before them or after them. It's not about anybody stealing an idea. It's about execution.
Yeah.
I didn't have what it took to get the job done on pushing idea over the finish line, and someone else did. And it taught me the lesson. And I got a couple things happening right now that I'm charging towards the goal line, and it may still be a long ways away, but every single day, my mission and focus is to at least make progress.
Yeah. 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 That's huge. Yeah. I remember seeing some of those shows, so it's funny you say that, where they would go out and taking somebody's
Terrible shows. I'm
Yeah.
actually glad that I didn't.
Yeah, definitely.
Because
Yeah.
it just there's how it exacerbates struggling. It makes it even worse. So in that sense,
Yeah.
The point was I just didn't have what it took to get it done.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, as we do wrap up here, what is like one or two things that if the listeners were to implement and take action on those today would help move their life forward today? What would those be?
I'll tell you number one, and it won't surprise you that the things I'm telling you are the things that I struggle with. So number one is I have a to-do list every single day. I write it on freaking envelopes. I write it in my journal, whatever. And if there's 10 things on that list, I actually know that there's 2 things on that list that are really important. And those are the things I need to focus on.
Yeah.
But what do? I focus on the other 8 because they're easier to get done. I can check the box. I can feel like I made some progress. But I know in my heart that those 2 things that I need to be focusing on, that I just push them down the road for another day. And so my number one like suggestion for myself and for anybody listening is, the project that you really want to do, and stop screwing around with all those other little to-do list things that keep you busy and distracted from the real goal.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we can all relate to that for sure. So that is a huge one. Kind of make those top 2 your non-negotiables for the day, right? And get them done. What is a few ways
exactly.
that we could,
I mean, when we hang up my two, yeah, go for it.
What's your 2?
No, I was just going to say my 2 are those are the things I'm going to do. I think you're probably going to ask what's the best way to follow along, or
yeah, it was.
Yeah. So number 1 is really the clearinghouse. Easy way to do it is just to go to my website, which is just charlieengle.com. On there is all my social media handles. I blog. There's a bunch of stuff, talks that I've given in front of thousands of people and in front of, like Mrs. Johnson's first grade class. So, and they're equally important, and so that's the simplest way. I mean, I'm on all the social media, but I'm not I try to just tell real stories about what's going on in my life, and wins, losses, everything else. So, I'm nobody's guru, but hopefully I set a good example for those people, especially that are struggling with addiction issues. And I'll finish by saying, on my website is my phone number and my email address. And I think you can attest that I'm pretty easy to get in touch with. And so if anything I said today is interesting, or someone wants to speak or exchange a message in private, by all means, reach out to me and I'll do my best.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you doing that. And definitely check out his book. I loved it. I read it probably in a few days. It was a quick read just because it was very interesting and flowed well together. Great writer. And check out the Netflix. It's on Netflix, right? Or maybe I watched it on Amazon, I guess, actually. But what the name of the film again?
iTunes.
What's the name of it again?
Running the Sahara.
Running the Sahara. Yeah. Incredible story. And so I appreciate you being here today. Thank you so much, Charlie. It means a lot.